I am out of my sorts here, thinking that I had everything ready to go. This is Talking Animals on WMNF, listener-supported community radio, WMNF Tampa, WMNF.org. If you like what you hear today, you can click on donate at WMNF.org to show your love. The Talking Animals radio show is going to get underway here, and I'm hoping that I can get things going. I'm probably going to need some technical help from Jessica Green to get things going here. She had me set up, and now I've wrecked things over. I am sitting in for Duncan Strauss on Talking Animals today. He is very excited that he's going to be back with you next week. And I'm hoping here in the background, we're going to be able to have some David Grisman Quintet playing in the background here for us. I hope you hear it. I don't. There we go. Well, no. All right. We are definitely not starting off the way that today that I expected that we would, but I'm hoping that you're able to hear one of my guests, Karen, possibly. Hey, there we go. I hear you now. Are you with me, Karen? Excellent. Hopefully the sound is going out here. I'm hoping now. Do we have Mariah?
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, this is an example of one of the staff here, Miss Julie, who does very much around here. A favorite phrase she used to have was, "I thought I made a mistake, but I was wrong." And I think that's kind of what I just did right there. So I am not going to worry about trying to bring David Grisman and Dog Nation into the background right here, because we're not going to go down that path again. But there is a connection to David Grisman Quintet and the album Dog Nation, DAWG Nation. And we're going to be talking about that later in the show. There's a connection between that and one of our guests today, Mariah Shesky. And our other guest on here is Karen Pleschia, two of the people who I have had the pleasure of getting to know through the ASPCA. And each of them in their own realm have done some amazing things in some animal world. So I'm going to let Karen start off, since she is this is her first time on WMNF. I'm going to have Karen introduce herself and talk about her background and why she's here with us today. Karen?
Oh, thanks, Glenn. And it's a pleasure to be here with you and Mariah. I love having the chance to talk animals with you. I am a certified cat and dog behavior consultant. I work primarily right now with pet guardians, both virtually and in the Boston area, helping people understand their pet's behavior and employ compassionate, humane solutions so that they can live amazing lives together. My background is kind of diverse in that I've worked in shelters and veterinary settings and pet care and all kinds of different places. And as Glenn mentioned, we met through working together with the ASPCA.
Excellent. And there may be some people who are listening today that I have put in touch with Karen, because one of the way that I first became aware of Karen was through her cat knowledge. So we'll be talking about cats today as well, with some of the expectations on that. But Mariah, back for, I think since I've had more free time, I think this is the third time I've sat in for Duncan, and I've leaned on Mariah to be there with me every time I've done. So welcome again. And reintroduce yourself again, because I'm sure most people are just hearing you for the first time.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks for having me back. I am based in Missoula, Montana, and I am a certified dog behavior consultant and certified professional dog trainer. And I focus on helping guardians of dogs exhibiting signs of fear and aggression,
or aggression, not always both. And then because I'm out west, I end up handling and working with a lot of herding breeds out here, which is a lot of fun. And again, just enjoyed meeting you and Karen and continuing our animal relationships, animal-linked relationships. And
that sounds odd, but that's actually the right way to describe it.
Yeah. And then, of course, anytime we can talk about dogs and music, let's do it.
There we go. Exactly. So, and once again, there is going to be, well, actually, that's really a good segue to talking about the album cover later. Is you mentioning working with herding dogs. Now, you live in western Montana, so there is, I assume, I remember one joke from the lockdown when social distancing of having to stay 6 feet apart, and everybody in Montana wondered why you had to be that close to each other, right? So,
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, since today, actually, we've introduced ourselves. Let's sit back. What we decided to talk about today were expectations of what we have as pet owners and what our pets can do for us. And we decided to explore this as our discussion topic today because you can look at it from so many different lenses of expectations at a grand level or, at the expectations when you're out on a walk. And since you mentioned herding dogs, Mariah, of working with them there, you have been amazed at the number of Australian cattle dogs that we have had here in Tampa available for adoption, because knowing that both of us have an affection for the Australian cattle dog, we would send each other pictures, and I would almost weekly be sending you a picture of an Australian cattle dog that came into the shelter here in Tampa. And a lot of the issues was that it just couldn't adjust to living in a home environment. So let's open that up as a segue for our first discussion. And since you're in an area, Mariah, with a lot of land where you are actually able to have herding dogs probably do some of those kind of things, you want to kick things off and with what you're seeing, that, again, thinking of the expectations of when the person got the dog and what turned out that they had, the four legs they had.
Sure. I think the first thing to talk about is my own experience. My first cattle dog, Mowgli, that I adopted, I thought he was real cute in the shelter. I was in college still. He was adorable. I knew a friend that had a blue heeler, and I thought I should do this. And I remember I was getting ready to leave on spring break for a tour with some musicians and traveling, and I adopted him the day before we went on tour for spring break. And this was a blue heeler who had lived outside of the city. He was about 10 months old. And I just started traveling with him. And my expectation at the time was that he was going to be very similar to the other dogs that I had known, my friends' dogs, primarily the chocolate lab that I was good friends with. And I just didn't know. I had no idea that these dogs, I knew they were herding breeds, and I knew that, they might chase things, but I had no idea the extent of how chatty they can be, how much they can chase things, whether it's a leaf blowing in the wind or your child or a cow. I learned really quickly. I learned a lot from this dog. I would never take it back, but I think it's a good example. They're a great size. A lot of these herding breeds are in that 30 to 40 pound range. So I see a lot of people get them because they're great in apartments. They're great in terms of the size.
So Australian cattle dog, and you mentioned other herding, what are some other examples of herding dogs?
Yeah, we see a lot of border collies out here. We see a lot of Australian shepherds, kelpies. We see a lot of German shepherds, although I think technically they're in the herding breed, but I think they could pop over into that working or even protection.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Generally, we don't think of shepherds as herding dogs.
Yeah. So we see quite a few, and I know they do pop up everywhere. I think they're very popular. They're very smart, very intelligent. They can do amazing things, and they can be tricky sometimes in a home or in a family.
We recently anyway, I'm not going to go down that path there. Recently, we had a dog who turned out, when we did the DNA test, was Australian Shepherd cattle dog mix, Australian cattle dog mix. And if you looked at him, because of the other mixes within, he really looked like a corgi, which is also does some herding. So all of a sudden, thinking that I just had this nice little cute 20-pound dog, turned out that I had a mix of multiple herding breeds. And he would organize things in the house sometimes. He wasn't over the top with it because there was enough mix. There was enough mix of the other breeds in there. But what I realized quickly was, even though he looked like a small version of the larger dog that we had, which is one of the motivations for having a mini-me, I had expectations that they were going to be similar. And it turned out, all of a sudden, I had a couch potato and a brand new bicycle who was about 2 years old there. So it's the same thing that it took me a while to finally realize. And he was the dog that made me really see the value of positive reinforcement. Because during that time I was an early trainer at this point, and my mindset was you molded what you had in front of you to what you wanted, rather than looking at what you've got in front of you and work with that. So in other words, I was in that mindset, oh, you want your dog to do this? This is how we'll get your dog to do this. And then I realized that, no, the dog's not learning. You're forcing the dog to do something. They're not learning to do it. And that's when positive reinforcement really kicked in for me with this cattle dog, because I started seeing the value of how much happier he was and more behaved he was when, in his mind, he started having things to do. And basically, sometimes it wasn't any more than tossing the ball or something that at least made him think he had a job to do. So I'm going...
Glenn, I think that you and Mariah just, like, in anecdotal ways, made really good points about general themes that we had discussed, which are creating realistic expectations based on the fact that you're looking at living with a different species, number one. It's not a little human, that it's a dog and it has specific needs, and that what that dog's genetic history and evolution are important, but also that it's an individual. It's a separate individual species, and that's something that sometimes is really hard for particularly new dog guardians to wrap their head around, is that when they bring this little four-legged creature into their house, it's not a little human, and that it doesn't come pre-programmed knowing exactly what you want it to do or to be. And so learning and not only learning how to help the dog, but learning who the dog is really important.
That is so key right there, learning who the dog is. That is one of the things that I used to love to do when I would be working with a new dog for the first time, or even, actually I did this recently with someone who has a new dog. And on that first time we got together, it literally was the game of playing, let's find out what he knows. And what we're learning is that he has a small animal prey drive. So he is, and he's a hound dog. He's got a lot of interesting things going on there. But that, you're absolutely right, Karen, is that dogs come, just like in the conversation, just like we've talked about so far. I came in with Scout with certain expectations. And I was able to adjust to it, but so often, I was able to adjust to it because at this point I had been working with animals for a couple of years. And, he was the one that changed my mindset or made me really see the value of positive reinforcement, and that very simple little things for a dog in their mind can be, thank you, you gave me something to do. And I think that's a lot from the expectations as well from dog owners, that we want to get a dog. We imagine how great it would be to have this dog sit on the couch with us at night. But then it turns out the dog's more interested in maybe eating the couch or doing some things. So all of a sudden, you were
I was going to say, Glenn, kind of adding to what Karen was saying, I think it can be really helpful to really think about what breed you're getting, what mix you're getting, and not necessarily just the breed, but also that, like you and Karen have mentioned, that dog in front of you in that moment. So, is it a 5-year-old? If you do want to lay on the couch at night, maybe a 5-year-old might be a better fit than, the 8-week-old puppy. But really thinking about the fact that we have all these different breeds, and we have bred them to do different jobs. Like your herding breed mix, playing with the ball was a great job for that dog. But for someone that that isn't interested in playing with the ball and wants to watch Netflix at night, that might not be the best fit for them. So really choosing wisely, thinking about the dog's history, if you have the option of getting that from the shelter, and thinking about, the age and hopefully setting yourself up for, some expectations that you hope this dog will have, whether it is sitting on the couch or playing ball or running a marathon.
And actually, one of the things that I popped in my mind as you were talking, generally when you hear a high-energy dog came back to the shelter, we had a dog that came back to the shelter one time because they wanted a more active dog, and all the dog wanted to do was lie around. So needless to say, there was a line of people wanted that dog immediately when they found out was going to be one that was lying around. But again, it comes back to that expectations of, having that idea. And I think I got to say, though, that's part of the challenge there. And I think we probably have, I've been guilty of it once or twice in my life, of seeing that animal in front of me and having that weak moment and saying, I'll deal with whatever I'm going to deal with. And I'll take that animal. So, and I say that because so often I think when people find a dog and see the dog, and we were talking dog here, but it could just as easily be a cat, of seeing it, and it's like, I've got to have this animal. It's just that emotional decision that you make in that moment that usually has something to do with some affection or eye contact or something. Or someone thinks that this dog is scared, they'll be happier at my home. So I think that's one of the challenges that's so hard for all of us, whether we work with the animals and we know what we're getting into, or it's somebody getting an animal for that first time. There's such an emotional aspect to that decision that we kind of throw out some of the rational thoughts. Yeah, I know. It's tough. It's tough. It comes back to expectations.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. And I think that brings up a good point that, there are things that we can do. We're probably not going to change that individual and mold them into be exactly what we want, but there are things that we can do to help, whether it's a cat or a dog, whether that is working with a professional or... Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I think it starts, immediately for me when I work with somebody, whether it's with a cat or a dog, is looking at the environment. And what does that animal's environment give us to set them up for success? You guys talked about herding dogs, and of course here in the Boston area, we are even the suburbs are pretty crowded and no one has big lots. So if I have a dog that needs a lot of movement, I have to look at that environment and what are some ways we can be creative, and what is the guardian's bandwidth to help that dog. And if they don't have a lot of bandwidth, what other things are available to them to give the dog what they need. And the environment is very critical for cats.
Oh, yeah. We can, well, actually, let's, environment brings up a whole other area that really does play into expectations. But let's go ahead and just pause here briefly. It is coming up on about 1:30. This is WMNF Tampa, Talking Animals radio show. My name's Glenn Hatchell. I am sitting in for Duncan today, who will be back next week, and he will be happy to be back next week. He has told me that. We've got some David Grissman Quintet in the background, and I think this is title track to Dog Nation. So I mentioned earlier in the show that there's a tie between this album and Mariah, who is with us today, one of our guests. Karen and Mariah joining me here today on Talking Animals. So on the album cover of Dog Nation, we're going to let Mariah tell the story and how it all came about.
Thanks, Glenn. It's one of my dog's claim to fame. The album was coming out in 2002, I believe, and I had always followed David Grissman, and there was an email that said, put your dog on the next dog album, and I sent a picture of Mowgli, the cattle dog that I mentioned earlier, sent the picture in, and a few months later, I saw the album cover, and he was on it with many other dogs.
There are many. Well, it's Dog Nation. We've got a whole nation on there. So if you want to give a quick description, as you did the other day, of where he is, for those who may be listening later on the archives and want to go back and find how cute Mowgli is and why you decided, oh my gosh, he's so cute, I have to have this dog.
Sure. It's a great example of why I did choose him, because he is so handsome. But you'll see the Springer wearing a hat, and I believe that was David Grissman's dog. There's a golden Irish setter-looking dog right behind him, and then right behind him is my little blue heeler Mowgli with his little triangle head. So again, it's the blending of music and dogs. I love that.
That's right. It's absolutely. And that happens here on WMNF as well. Talking Animals. This show has been on WMNF, I believe, for more than 20 years, and very well supported, and should be, because Duncan does an outstanding job with his show week after week, and I'm just tickled to death to be able to sit in for him and also be in here with two of my favorite people, Karen Pleschia and Mariah Shesky, and we are talking today about expectations and the expectations that we have as pet owners and for the pets that we bring in. So we've been talking, I'll say, at kind of a grand level, and such about expectations, but let's take it all the way down to a level of expectations on a walk. We've all worked with dog owners who need help with their dog's skills on walking and walking better and getting attention. But that can be all over the place, or let me rephrase that. Some people have a different expectation for their dog on a walk versus what other people do. So let's talk about expectations on a walk. What should a dog experience on a walk? Either one of y'all can start off with that. What do you think?
Personally, I mean, for me, and this is Karen.
And that is a cat in the background and not a child.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you can hear her. Sorry, but we can talk about expectations.
No, I love it. I love it
all day with this crew. But anyway, with a dog, I try to help people understand that a walk is one of the few times that our dogs have the opportunity to have some choices. So much of their lives are dictated by our schedules and our homes and our expectations of them. And so I like to encourage people have the expectation that the dog will be able to explore and sniff and gather information about their world, and that the walk is as much for them, maybe even more so for them than it is for the person. If you're on a mission, then it might not be the best time to bring your dog with you.
So I'm going to jump in because this is a question that I've wondered about a little bit. And since I have the two of y'all to discuss it, I'm going to bring it up. So often I see people who are walking their dogs. The dog finds something in the grass that it starts sniffing. But if the dog sniffs for, it seems like some period of time, it's like all of a sudden the human wants to pull them away from that and get them walking again, as if there's something in that smell that is going to happen to them. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? Do you see that where you live?
Yeah.
So when should an owner tell the dog, okay, that's enough? Some what do you think?
I have opinions, but Mariah, do you want to jump in? Sure. I would say, the dogs, so much of the dog's world is processed through their nose. And I would say if they're on a scent and something is interesting and they feel the need to keep sniffing and keep checking that out, that I would let them sniff as long as they need to. And oftentimes if you do wait that out, assuming you have the time and the availability to safely wait for them to finish sniffing, a lot of times then they'll pop their head up and say, okay, I've got it. I'm done now. Let's keep going.
Exactly.
And I find that oftentimes then they've had a need that's been met, and then they're pretty comfortable trotting along with you and, maybe going to investigate the next smell. So, I think allowing them the time to do that is ideal.
I agree 100%, but I would add, again, we're here in an urban environment in Boston, and people get very nervous about their dogs sniffing for too long because there are many dangerous things when dogs put their nose to the ground in the city environment. And so I encourage people to be alert and aware, and if it is, and to teach their dogs some sort of a cue to let's keep going, or, leave it if you want to go with that. But something where if it's unsafe, you have the ability to let the dog know that that's not the appropriate thing to keep sniffing. And, some of those things in our environment are things like potentially dead rats that could be poisoned, chicken bones, unfortunately needles, things like that we don't want our dogs to spend any time on. So I think I agree with Mariah. When I have dogs out on trails or when owners have dogs in their neighborhoods that are safe, let them sniff for as long as they want. They're taking in as much information as we take in with our eyes. And so, but if you need to keep them safe, have a way to do that.
Agree 100%. And you raised a really good point that I haven't thought about because, well, just again, the environment's different, is that there are times you don't want to let your animal go off and explore something. Immediately, I think of puddles of water that are in the road, for example, because that's going to be full of chemicals, and as just one simple example. But so let's talk about cats. Karen, you are the, I think, we'll kind of transition a little bit to cats. You are the cat expert, I believe, among the three of us for sure. So what would you say are some of the, some general misexpectations that people have regarding cats when they adopt a cat?
Oh, wow. How much time do we have? No. So I think for one thing, people underestimate the importance of space, and I apologize for my little old lady.
Oh, I love it. No.
Crying in the background there.
This is an animal show.
To say. And she's very vocal these days. And that's, again, there's an expectation. I know she's old and she's vocal right now, and I'm okay with that. That's just who she is. But I think when people first bring a cat into the house, my experience is that a lot of people tend to get cats because they feel like they're lower maintenance pets. And they underestimate the importance of setting up the environment for the cat's success. They underestimate the importance of enrichment. Regular play, opportunities to climb and, do things like that for a cat. And scent is also really important for cats. When you're integrating cats, I think that comes into play. A lot of people expect that, well, it's a cat. It's going to like any other cat, and they throw two cats together. And we have to remember that cats know each other, and they know who belongs in their territory by scent. So we have to spend some time creating that familiarity through scent before we throw them together. So I think there are a lot of, scratching is a big one. I think that people think cats should know that they don't scratch the rug or the furniture. How come they don't know that? They don't know your furniture is, costs a lot of money and you want it not to be scratched. To them, scratching is a way to mark their territory, to deposit their pheromones on something and to show that they belong there.
The cat that I had before never scratched the furniture.
And, again, every cat's an individual. My cats right now don't, but they did initially. But I set up the environment first. But they love to scratch the rug, right? So they want to scratch the rug in a certain place. And so how can we help them do what they need to do in their environment in ways that are acceptable to us? And so how do we set that environment up so that they don't scratch the furniture, but they scratch something appropriate that still fulfills their needs? So I think there's a lot of things like that again, people just think, well, they're cats. They know. They're made to be our pets. And they're a different species, and they have different needs than we do. So I could go on for a while, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation with all kitty talk.
Oh, no. That was spot on, perfect. And part of what you said that was so perfect is we could have inserted any species of animal in what you said there. And that's really what I think is amazing about it. Mariah is the one who did the training with the three-banded armadillo. But it is amazing, that process, regardless of the species. And even if you think of that species being Homo sapiens, of just thinking of, and this keyed in that I hadn't even thought about until you were talking about the aging and the expectations for that expectation is going to be so influenced by the age of the animal.
And, your expectations are going to need to shift, right, as your animal ages. So the expectations you have for a puppy are going to be different than the expectations you would have of an adolescent, would be different than a senior. I mean, my cats right now are all geriatric. And that has meant that I've had to adjust my expectations. I have to change where I feed them. I have to change their access to places that they like to get to. I've had, add stairs to little pet stairs for them to get to certain places. They like warmer beds now. So we have towels. We have an old house, so we have radiators. And that little old lady you heard crying, she loves to sleep on the radiators. I had to add pet beds on the radiators so she wouldn't burn herself. The lower lipped litter boxes. Those things all shift as they age. So while we're talking about expectations and looking at the individual, age is a piece of that individuality.
I find that we are such creatures of habit, us humans.
Yeah.
And that shift in expectations and understanding what our animals need, especially as they age, is really tough. We're so used to, we do our hike every day with our 2-year-old dog, or we have our training session every morning. And, my dog I have right now is 5, and she wants to sleep in now. And my productive time is in the morning, so I want to get up and do training and do the things. And she says, no, I would like to sleep now. So I've had to, that's a minor change, but moving when you see your dog's age or your cat's age, that's tough for a lot of us. And it really does take a lot of planning, like you're saying, adjusting the environment and their activities and what they need and what they enjoy. It's tough.
Yeah.
This is WMNF Tampa Talking Animals radio show. You're hearing the voices of Mariah Shesky and Karen Plesia. My name's Glenn Hatchell. Duncan Strauss will be back in here next Wednesday, and he is going to be very happy to be back in here with you. But I am tickled to death to be in here today as we're talking about expectations. And one of the things that you brought up, Karen, I believe, as we were discussing different avenues we could go, that I thought was brilliant because it's misunderstood by so many people. And let's talk about cat petting and over petting.
And it can be true of dogs, too. For sure. I've seen this, especially in little dogs, but any dog that can certainly have a shorter fuse with this. We all fall, maybe not we all, that's a bad generalization, but a lot of people will fall into the habit of sort of mindlessly petting their pet. So just you're sitting there on the couch or, whatever on the bed and just stroking, and then out of the blue, my cat bit me. I was just petting him. And I think, and again, I've heard that be the case with dogs. I'm sure you guys have too. And I equate it to, when I talk to people, it can be overstimulation, certainly, for some animals. It's just too much. But it can also just get annoying. I mean, imagine if I were, stroking your arm, and maybe the first 1 or 2 times you did it to make you feel better. It's okay. But if I kept going and going and going and going, it would get a little awkward, and you might pull away a little bit. And if I didn't notice that you pulled away a little, and I kept going, you might have to warn me a little bit louder, like, "Hey, could you just cut that out?" And so cats and dogs don't have language, and you might miss them sort of leaning away a little bit and saying, "Okay, I've had enough." And if you miss that, then they have to, quote unquote, raise their voice, but they don't have language. And so what comes next might be a swat or a bite or a hiss, some sort of warning. It'll vary from cat to cat. And that's not a behavior problem necessarily unless you've repeatedly ignored their signs, and now it becomes their first line of defense. So I think that being cognizant of how we touch our animals and respectful of their personal space, and just say, okay, I'm going to stroke once or twice, and then I'm going to stop and see how you respond to that.
So a couple of things popped in my mind. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agreed, Karen. We see that with so many dogs that I work with as well, and I think it is hard sometimes, when you have this soft dog and you want to touch them, and that's why you've got a dog, so you can pet them and watch a movie or go, relax at the end of the day. And it's hard to understand that sometimes our pets might want to be near us. Maybe they hop up on the couch and they sit next to us, but they may not want us to pet them the entire time they're sitting there.
Exactly.
So it's tough. I love that. Pet them for a couple of seconds and then see what they do. Do they leave? Do they stay there? Do they nudge your hand?
Right.
Let's see what they do.
Yeah, same with cats. Like, I definitely have had cats that'll, put their head back under my hand and be like, nope, keep going. And then other cats that are like, oh, now I can curl up and go to sleep. She stopped touching me,
So something that you just said right there that fits exactly what I think both of y'all have talked about is do it, stop, and wait to see what the animal does next. If the animal solicits for more touching, more petting, then continue. But you're right as far as that that little pause to see if there is some reaction from the animal because you stopped. So often, and this happens with me and my cats because they are so soft, I get such pleasure and such reinforcement from just feeling the fur and doing that I'm completely oblivious to whatever they may be thinking about at that moment. So the good thing is my cats are very affectionate, so they generally have learned that, they know if I'm going to do that, they're going to enjoy it as well. But if you're meeting a cat for the first time, and this happened to me. I remember exactly what you were saying. I was at a friend's house, sitting on the couch. Gorgeous tuxedo cat comes up, rubbing all over me, and the next thing I know, bites my finger. But thinking back now, all of the signs were there. The tail was swashing. All of those signs that said, don't touch me, were there from the cat. The one thing the cat didn't do was jump off the couch and get away from me, which I think is one of the differences between a dog and a cat, that a cat's going to say, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to bite you, and a dog's going to say, I'm going to get away from you. Generally?
That's a bit of a generalization.
You think that's too much of one?
Yeah, I do think that there are cats who will just move away, and I think that there are dogs that will choose to bite you. I think it's very much an individual thing. But I think the other thing is that there are times, I said that it's not a behavior problem if they turn around and bite you when you're petting them, and that was probably a generalization on my part. But there are times when animals are conflicted about what they want, right? Just like sometimes we are too. And so I've definitely had cats where they're rubbing against my legs, and next thing I know, they're up my leg biting me, and I haven't reached to touch them at all. And that's a situation where they might actually have a neurological or a behavioral issue with overstimulating themselves. And so that is a time when you would seek veterinary and or professional behavior help if there truly is not an identifiable trigger.
Very much so. Are y'all hearing that in the background?
Yeah. I didn't know if that was just me.
What'd you walk by, Mariah? So Mariah is actually looking outside at snow dumping in western Montana as we're doing this show. This is WMNF Tampa, Talking Animals. We're talking about expectations today, and not only, well, really the expectations that we have on animals. And we've been talking about petting and recognizing when an animal's had enough. And I think one of the consistencies through this is giving the animal a choice. And we're making that decision there, giving the animal a choice by stopping the petting.
Right.
How often do you think expectations are misaligned because... Sorry, that's driving me nuts there in the background. I can't figure out what that is.
It's driving me crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So, what do you? Let's see. Where were?
How often are expectations misaligned?
Yes. Take it.
Misaligned based on what? Like, are you just thinking? Are you saying in general?
In general,
humans and what their pets want.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's. I think at some point we all have expectations that are misaligned, right?
Yes. All right.
Well, and I also think thinking about what your previous experience that shapes what your expectations are, and I think I think social media and the internet, that is tough. You get online and you see people having these amazing experiences with all these animals, and you think, well, that's not my experience. What am I doing wrong? Or what should I be doing differently? And, that's tough. That's, I would do your best to not compare yourself to people showing all that they can do with their dogs and cats online, because as we all know, that's not a full picture and not true reality.
Oh, so true. And I think over time, society's expectations of animals have really shifted. Like, I think about when I was a child and we had household pets. It was a very different set of expectations. So I agree with you, Mariah. We have to think about how our expectations were formed and are they realistic. And just like every human relationship you have is different. Every relationship you have with an animal is going to be different, even within your own little bubble. Like my relationship with my last dog is not going to be the same as my relationship with my next dog, and my expectations shouldn't be the same. Absolutely.
It seems like the key is to stay open and really enjoy what that animal is presenting you at that moment, and reach out for help if you need it.
I think you touched on something there that I hadn't really given a lot of thought to, is just in general society's expectations these days of what it was 10 and 15 years ago, or longer. That so often now people want to adopt a dog, and the first thing they want to do is take them to the outdoor restaurant.
Exactly. That expectation drives me a little. That's very much for the person and not for the dog, right?
And there we go with so many of the decisions that come around with the dogs. It sometimes make it so much of a challenge for us that, it is that, we want this for us. That's why often, when people would say, I'm thinking about getting another dog for my dog. It's always that question line is, does your dog want another dog or do you want another dog?
And the same with cats. I see a lot of things go south when people get another cat for their cat.
So do you... Yes, very true. So societal expectations. We've got about 4 minutes left here on Talking Animals. And so let's wrap it up talking about societal expectations. And if you have an animal, and since I would say that a lot of our listeners live somewhere between the density of Boston and the density of Western Montana. But just thinking in general, I think the expectations of what people expect for their dogs, we'll talk about this dogs for right now, of having them and when they're out on a walk and in public, what kind of things do you see in the Boston area, Karen?
Mm-hmm. When people are just out
just
on a
that
walk
general expectations that if someone has a dog and out walking, what do you feel is the general expectation that people would,
I think people, one, they expect their dog knows how to walk on a leash at their side, particularly in the more densely populated areas. They want a dog who's not going to bark and lunge at other dogs or at people. Those are kind of the two big ones that I get a lot of clients looking for help with. They on the city streets, it's hard. You're in a tight space, and you have to walk your dog if you live in an apartment. And the expectation that a lot of people have of whatever dog they get, no matter how big or small or age or breed, is that it's going to be able to do that and do it nicely.
And I would say out here, we get that as well, and Missoula is certainly becoming more populated. But the big one I see is everyone wants to let their dog off leash, and we have a lot of off leash areas here. Mm-hmm. And I find that the leash walking, if they can hike off leash, great, and we can work on recall and polite trail manners and all of those sorts of things. But the leash walking is so hard for some of these dogs because they're used to just running free in the off-leash area. Mm-hmm. So interesting thinking about environment and how some of those expectations change based on environment and where we live.
That is very true. and it does. So many things we talked about today, it'd be hard to... it'd be easy to summarize it, but so many levels when it comes to expectations. But I think we've had a fun discussion today. We are wrapping up, coming close to the end. We've got about a minute or so before we'll make way for NPR News. This is WMNF Tampa. My name's Glenn Hatchell. I've been sitting in today for Duncan Strauss, who will be back here next week. I want to thank Mariah Shesky and Karen Pleschia for joining me today. It has been...
Thank you for having us.
Pleasurable for me. I hope it has been for you as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. It's been a lot of fun.
We're going to let David Grissman take us on out of here. And this is WMF Tampa.